Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Atheist Experience. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week is Don Baker.
Hey, good to be here.
How you doing? Don picked the music, which I actually like. I've just been giving him a hard time.
He's blaming me for the music.
No, it's a beautiful piano solo. I liked it, but I just want to give you a hard time about it. We're live, as we usually are. It's Sunday, September 9th, 2007. This is a live interactive public access television program. We'll have the number up for you shortly. You'll be able to call in. As long as you're watching it live, the number will appear like right over there. And unless they switch cameras on me when I'm pointing. We can't give the number out by voice because we're not the only ones who use the studio. And you may be watching this recording over Google Video, which we've now started doing. The audio portion's always been available for website and will continue to be as an MP3 download or OGG Vorbis. But the video portion is also available now by Google Video. We are aware that the episode from 2 weeks ago is not up on Google Video and had really bad audio, and there were problems with the studio. We're trying to get it corrected. I'm going to see if my copy at home works, and we'll get that up for you. It's this program, as I said, it's live and interactive. The phone number will be up, and it's a chance for atheists in the Austin area to interact with the public, answer questions, discuss and debate issues that are relevant to church-state separation or whatever you happen to have on your mind that we find interesting, and to kind of alleviate some of the misperceptions and lies that have been spread about who atheists are and what we do or don't believe. But also, it's just kind of a good opportunity to have good discussions with people. So we'll have the number up for you shortly. As those of you who watch regularly know, we'll go through some quick announcements first, and then Don will have a presentation, and we'll take some phone calls. The audio is fixed now for the show 2 weeks ago, so that portion, is it up already, or is it going to be up?
Yes, it's already up.
It's already up, so that's been corrected.
The video is still delayed.
And I'll work on that as soon as I get home and find out what's going on. In addition to this program, the ACA also sponsors a bi-weekly internet audio podcast called The Nonprofits. That's Prophets. You can go to nonprofitsradio.com, and you can also get there from the ACA website, which you'll see up there and probably down at the bottom of the screen in a minute, www.atheist-community.org or nonprofitsradio.com, as I said. We were live yesterday. We'll be live again on the 22nd at 2 p.m., That may change, actually. The back cruise is also September 22nd, and I might move the show up an hour. I'll talk about that and get it out, because I'd like to have enough time to actually get changed and get downtown. So we might as well mention the back cruise since I brought it up. Saturday, September 22nd at 6 p.m. There's information on the website. This isn't strictly limited to members, so if you're in the Austin area and you're interested in the ACA and going out on an event with us, please feel free to contact the person organizing it. The pricing details and all that information is available at the website. It's a good evening of just kind of relaxing. We go out, we get on a boat, take some food, some drinks, no glass bottles of any kind. Some folks bring guitars or yo-yos or whatever you want to bring. We take the boat out and watch the bats come back in just after dark. So it was really great last year.
We'll watch them leave.
Leave, yes. All right. Those nocturnal things, it just kind of threw me for a loop.
Go out for the bugs at night.
Yeah. It was a great fun last year. We're going to try and make it kind of an annual event, and so it's Saturday the 22nd. As I said, we're sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. The ACA has weekly meetings every Sunday at Romeo's on Barton Springs Road, except for the first Sunday of the month when we host a lecture series at the Austin History Center located at the corner of 9th and Guadalupe. The regular Sunday morning brunch and thing starts at around 11, and the lecture series starts at 12:15. All of our events are open to the public. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to join us. You don't have to be a member to attend. Although membership is encouraged for those of you who appreciate the work we do and like to be involved and help out, you can speak to, there's board members at all of those events that you can talk to. And in addition to that, we also have a happy hour every Thursday at the Dog and Duck Pub located at the corner of 17th and Guadalupe. Actually, Guadalupe is like our main street. We should co-opt that. That begins at around 7 o'clock and lasts until people are sober enough to go home. And it's a good time out at Dog and Duck Pub's really great to us, and we always have a good time down there as well. And a series of Wednesday night events. And because Mike isn't here, I'm going to probably get it wrong, but I believe this Wednesday is board gaming along with CFI at Thor's Hammer. And the following weekend will be bowling at Austin 300, and then the Wednesday after that will be pool at Side Pocket Billiards, North Lamar, about a block south of Breaker.
That sounds right to me. Yeah.
I think that's the schedule, but it's all on the website. You can hit for details, and you can also, if you have a question, comments, feedbacks, questions about any of our events or what's going on, you can email tv@atheist-community.org. That goes to myself, the co-hosts, some of the people behind the scenes. We can't promise to respond to every email, but we'll try to answer your questions, especially if they're about events like that. We do read all of them, and we try to take
We appreciate the feedback, yeah.
Yeah, try to take any criticisms and comments into consideration, and mistakes. If in fact
make our share of those too.
if in fact you catch us in a mistake, which is so rare that it happens at least twice a week, you feel free to email us that, and if it's anything relevant that's worthy of correction on the next show, we'll certainly do that. Boy, did I hit everything? Because I went out of order.
Yeah, I think you hit everything.
Yeah, because the other one was Mark's lecture.
You might want to mention after the show.
Yeah. After the show, everybody involved, or most of us involved, get together and go out to dinner. And right now we're going to IHOP at the corner of I-35 and Cesar Chavez. The show's over at 4:30. We've got the room from 5 to 7. And any atheist or atheist-friendly person, as I said, is welcome to come down and join us. Today was actually a lecture day.
Right.
Mark Loy, ACA member, a good friend of several of us, came and talked to us about the problems with the tax tests, progressive voucher system, and low-cost textbooks.
Yes.
And it was very well done, and we're happy that Mark was able to do that for us, and I look forward to talking to him more about some of those subjects later. Yeah. So what are you talking about today?
Well, we should also mention that yesterday we had a rally downtown for church-state separation.
Yeah,
and
neither
Matt nor I could make it, unfortunately, but we have some folks in the audience that went, and I understand it was attended by about 50 people, and we had something like 12, 15 different groups come in from out of town, different speakers. One of our board members.
I'm not sure about all the details, but it was headed up by Joe Zemecki, who's the Texas director for American Atheists. And Joe, if you're actually watching, you can just call in and we'll put you on and you can tell us a little bit about it later on today.
Yeah, it was cool. Well, today I'd like to talk about this idea of leaps of faith. And what sort of prompted me to choose this topic is that we get a lot of calls that go like, well, the caller will call in and say, hey, can you prove that God doesn't exist? And we have to say, no, we can't prove that.
Well, it depends on how you define God.
That's right. It depends a lot on how you define that. And so the caller will then say, well, Christianity must be true, right? So there's this huge gap, though, between the existence of some God that's sort of ill-defined and the existence of a Christian God. And there's two very different topics, right? God could be any number of things, and there's even confusion over the name of God, right? If you use God as a proper name or God as a title, there's a lot of confusion even there, right? And I think this confusion is even intentional, right? Why not choose Yahweh as the name of your God, or Jehovah, or some proper name? So there might be a need to measure a way, or need to have a way to measure the distance between different pools of belief or different bodies of belief, and so. One of the things I would like to make, the points I'd like to make is, well, if you can reason your way from one thing to another, that's sort of a free ride, or that's sort of, using your head and you can sort of get there from here. But if you believe something that it really sort of jumps you to another pond where you can swim around with your reason or whatever, right? So, I would claim that people like atheists want to have no leaps of faith. They want to sort of exist in reality. We're part of the so-called reality-based community. We don't want to have any leaps of faith at all. But there are lots of different people with different beliefs, and some of them are conflicting. And you can have different beliefs leading to people, being really mad at each other and have holy wars and all sorts of fighting over these different beliefs because there's no evidence behind the beliefs, right? And you can't just say, well, look at this thing over here. This proves my case, and your case is wrong, obviously, and you have an argument about it, whatever. That's what atheists tend to like to do, is we have to tend to debate these things, right? So the metric I would like to propose here is how many leaps of faith does it take to get from atheism or no beliefs to whatever your belief is, right?
One, as long as it's a really
big one, right? So the point of the show today is to break down all this really sort of big leap of faith to Christianity or deism or some of these other beliefs, and look at how many leaps you really have to make in order to get there. This idea of leap of faith was attributed to Soren Kierkegaard, and it can be defined as a belief in something without evidence or in spite of evidence to the contrary. So a leap is really sort of a guess, right? You're sort of believing something that you don't have any evidence for. The likelihood of it being correct, because it's a guess, would be very small, right? And when you start making multiple leaps, the likelihood gets multiplied, right? This very small number gets multiplied by a very small number. It becomes an even smaller number, right? So the more leaps of faith you make, the less likely the thing is to be true. And I count 30 leaps of faith from atheism to Christianity. So the likelihood of it being true is, all things being equal, is basically nothing, right, as far as I'm concerned, right? So even if we accept the one leap of faith that is that God exists, it's still very, very unlikely that Christianity exists. So it's like
that's a huge leap from the get-go.
Right.
I mean, you're going to kind of go through your list of them.
We're going to go through the list.
But the very first one is the one you just mentioned,
right,
that some God exists. Mm-hmm. And I would say, just from the outset, that particular leap is at least as fanciful as most of the other ones combined. Because, for many reasons. What is your justification, or what is the, I guess, rationalization? What path is it that you would have to take in order to kind of back up your leap of faith? I mean, I realize that faith, you don't need any backing for it, and that's its, I guess, one saving grace is you don't have to explain why you're believing nonsense. But as far as how big of a leap it is,
sure, and
usually there's some excuse.
Yeah, so the existence of a God is certainly one thing. I mean, when you start talking about God with an atheist, that's probably the first thing that the atheist is going to bring up, right? Because it's sort of the first step in doing this, right? And we're not even convinced that that's even a very sound jump, right? And we bring this topic up all the time, right? In the absence of evidence for something, you're more conservative. The more conservative thing is to not believe it, not buy into it, right? Not believe the Nigerian scam that came in your email, right? Because you don't have any evidence that it's true. These sorts of things. It's best to be conservative. So this is where we get off the train of these beliefs. So these 30 guesses that I claim, it may be more than 30. I mean, you probably can think of a few more that need to be made here. These 30 leaps of faith are like making 30 wild guesses in a row and arriving at the truth. It's like winning a lottery that has 30 balls, right? It's like, anyway. So we've already talked about the first one, is there exists a God. And then the next one I'd like to hit is there exists only one God. And that's sort of a leap of faith, is that we really are talking about monotheism. There's only one God, but many belief systems like Hinduism and such have multiple gods. They have multiple pantheons, and I would claim even Christianity does. I mean, by the way, many of the leaps here I'm going to talk about have actually been show topics, right? So Tracy has been on and talked about a lot of the gods that led up to Christianity. There's Elohim, there's El, there's Ashira, there's Sophia. All these are mentioned in the Bible, by the way. In Genesis 6, we have the sons of God interbreeding with humans to become the heroes of old.
Yeah, when you start including the possibility of like demigods or lesser gods, or even within, you've got the Holy Trinity, plus you've got this dualistic approach among some Christians where you have God who's all-powerful and then Satan or the devil who's damn near all-powerful, but just not quite enough to beat the other guy.
Right.
So you have a multiple God system there.
It's a pantheon.
One of the problems that we've talked about before is that, okay, we're going to go ahead and grant, for the sake of argument, this first huge leap of faith that some God exists, and your second one is that only one God exists.
Right.
And one of the reasons why that's a good kind of first step or second step, and also, is because it is implausible, even internally. A polytheistic pantheon of gods makes more sense from a practical standpoint than one God, which is why when we move from polytheism to monotheism, the traits of these mini-gods get kind of summed up in the one, and he becomes internally conflicted.
Right. So the multiple gods gives you kind of a convenient out for why things don't work out in real life, right? something screws up, well, one God was fighting against the other,
Yeah.
right? Or you know, it was a tug of war, and one, you know, God A won and God B didn't win, or whatever. Right? You can always have a
They're trying to sabotage each other or
Right.
bickering over territory.
Right. It's more like I like the Greek gods because they're kind of like a soap opera.
Yeah, you got well. If you got a god of war and a god of lust, what if your war is based on lust for somebody? So now they're struggling, and you can explain anything. Oh, this one wanted
Right.
this, and this one wanted
Or
that.
they got new shoes and they're clomping around up there and making noise. Anyway. Okay. Even in the Bible, we have the notion of molten gods. You know, and this God of the Bible being all afraid of molten gods, which I find very, very funny. Well, you know, why would somebody who's so powerful be so concerned about such a thing? Anyway, leap number 3: God is intelligent. So we presume that God's pretty smart, right? They're just kind of tied up in this notion of God. I guess a lot of these first ones are kind of pinning down the nature of God. You could have a stupid God, right? Why not? So this is is one of the assumptions behind the ID movement, and so on. So were you going to say?
So you're not saying that your number 3 there, where it says God is intelligent. The fact that God, as you know, we've already granted in the first one. Whatever, that some God exists, and inherent in the definition is some level of intelligence. What you're talking about for number 3 is a sufficient level of intelligence, a wisdom, or
Maybe so. Maybe you know,
smarter than us.
Smarter than us. Okay. Right. But then you get problems with the Bible, right? Of all the different mistakes that God's made along the way. So, like, you know. Like Adam and Eve falling.
I don't know, having a creation, having it go wrong, starting over, having it go wrong, starting over, having it go wrong.
Starting over.
Yeah.
Confusing
the Bible is an anthology of the failures of Jehovah to get anything at all right.
So we're still kind of in the land here where God could be some sort of alien species, right? And there's this quote by Arthur C. Clarke: "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." Which and even the Raelians think that there's some other species that created humans, right? There's a lot of different beliefs along these lines that maybe there's some other intelligence out there that that we're just calling God because we don't know any better, right? We have in the Aztecs, when they saw the Spaniards come, they thought that, oh, this is the return of Quetzalcoatl, our god, that we were expecting to come back from the east. So anyway, so what is a god exactly? Leap number 4: the God is all-powerful and almighty. So this assumption of omnipotence. And this gets into a host of other problems. There's a lot of reasons why you shouldn't believe this, right? There's a whole lot of problems. There's this free will problem. If humans have free will, then effectively humans have power that God doesn't have, right? If you can make a decision, God doesn't have the power to force you not to make that decision. Right?
Yeah, except that the Bible specifically talks about God circumventing people's free will. Pharaoh wanted to let the Egyptians go, but God hardened his heart and prevented him from doing that. The bigger thing, though, is that omnipotence isn't actually mentioned in the Bible at all.
Oh, that's not true. In Revelations 19:6, it's mentioned, "The Lord God omnipotent reigneth."
Okay.
Okay. And Paul said that God cannot tell a lie, and some of these things. So here's a little puzzle for you.
I think that's a translation thing.
On the omnipotent thing, does God have the power to limit himself? Okay, here's a little quandary. This is called the omnipotence paradox, right? I have the power to limit myself. I can cut off my arm. That will limit my abilities from then on, and I have the power to do that. Okay? Does God have that power? Well, either he has that power or he doesn't have that power. If he has that power, then he should do that. Then he could potentially do that, right? And then he'd be limited, right? And lose it. And if he doesn't have that power, then he's not omnipotent. So anyway, this is a good little puzzle for you to think about. Okay, the next one, God is self-creating. So you have this problem of, well, you're explaining the universe by the existence of a God. God created the universe, so therefore the universe doesn't have to be self-creating, but you've just moved the problem back. The God has to be self-creating, or God has to have come from a long line of whatever, or he has to exist outside of time, or some magic special pleading. Oh, Matt's looking this thing up. 1906.
Yeah, it doesn't say anything like what you
Okay,
said.
well, maybe I wrote the number down wrong.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Okay.
it continues, but it's Lord God Almighty, which is in your version translated as omnipotent.
Okay, well, Almighty is kind of also a catchphrase, right?
Yeah, where I'm interjecting here, or I think the points are well made, and it's good to track these down, but you can't get Christian theologians to agree on the traits of God and everything else. But one of the things is that you don't want to be arguing against, like, for example, the omnipotence paradox. I realize that most modern theologians argue for a definition of omnipotence which is all-powerful, that is logically possible to possess. So the idea of could he create a rock so big that he couldn't lift it is logically absurd. It's like, could he create a square circle? So no, of course he doesn't have that power. But when they say omnipotence, they're only talking about all power that is logically coherent.
Yes, I've seen that, and I think it's really lame, because what you have is you have a definition that is sort of self-referential.
Right.
The definition implies that the definition can't be falsified.
Right. What you get is
so therefore the definition is true.
What you
but
get
it's meaningless, right? If you can't create a definition that is based on simpler things, then you're screwed.
Well, what you get is that this term omnipotence has no meaning.
Right.
Is useless as a description. And most people, when they would say, God Almighty or an omnipotent God, they're not talking about a God that can, in fact, do everything, including the logically impossible. They're just talking about a being that is so vastly superior in power and capabilities to us that it might as well be omnipotence. And that, I still think there's problems with.
Oh, yeah.
But at least you've avoided some of the logical problems.
So there's a whole song and dance.
Yeah, well.
Right. So I talked about the God is self-creating to solve this infinite regress problem, right? Of who created your God? Or
except
who's your
self-creating
God's God?
is a bad phrase.
Is it?
Yeah, because most Christians
Exists
don't
outside of time and in nebulous,
Yeah. Eternal.
Eternal.
There's a difference between self-creating and eternal. So most of them would make that a distinction too.
Okay.
I'm just playing Jesus' advocate.
Yeah, Jesus' advocate, right. So, if X
But
exists...
still, the timeless, the infinite existence is a problem.
It's a problem. It's a leap of faith, absolutely. That God decided to create the universe is number 6. So there's this notion of a conscious decision to do something, and this is completely at odds with the idea of God being perfect, right? If God is perfect and He is all-powerful, then the universe is perfect, right? So there's no need to change anything, right? Right?
No, I agree with you where I thought you were going.
Either it's perfect after, or it was perfect before,
right.
But it can't be both.
The
right?
idea is that God as perfection is inherent and complete without any need to create the universe.
Right.
Nothing to do with whether the universe is perfect, though.
Well, right. So they're related, right?
Yeah.
So number 7, God did indeed create the universe, being all powerful, which gets into the whole problem of, well, maybe the universe was self-creating, or maybe some other thing created it, or maybe it exists independently of time, just like God does.
Yeah, that's an important distinction. And when you're talking about the various path that you have to take, one is that you can believe there's a God, and that there's only one God, and that He's intelligent and extremely powerful, and wanted to create the universe. But in fact, the universe was not created by this God. That we're talking about two completely separate things that could be coexistent. So
right. So let me hit a few more, and we'll take a few callers after a bit. I want to get to the point where we're talking about deism. So what I'm trying to do with these first few is kind of narrow things down to where we get to a set of beliefs that's pretty close to what many of the founding fathers had, and then as part of the way of doing that is we'll depart from that and go down all the way to Christianity, which is quite a long distance from there. So the rest of these, a handful of these, are relatively fast. Number 8, God cares about His creation. So it's like Pinocchio's creator, Geppetto, caring a lot about his little creation and how it turns out, and that the universe wasn't created as a mistake, right? So that's what number 8 implies.
but that is inconsistent with deism.
Okay, yes, you're some forms of deism.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Thomas Paine wouldn't buy that. Number 9, humans are somehow special in the creation above all other things, which, given our knowledge about the universe, how old it is and how big it is, it's hard to imagine that we're the purpose of its creation, given that, we're so insignificant. I mean, that's one of the things you learn when you look at cosmology is just how insignificant we are in the grand scheme of things. Number 10, that humans have a soul that survives after death. And we've talked we've done whole shows on souls and the notion of ensoulment and when that happens and who does that, and all this tinkering we're doing with stem cells and cloning and all that begs a lot of questions of who's really creating souls and whether they even exist or not. We haven't found one yet, so don't have any evidence of that, so that's a big leap. Number 11, God wants humans to behave morally, and apparently that God cares about your sex life. Number 12, the God is omniscient, and so he knows whether you've been naughty or nice, right? He can look in on you and
sure we're talking about God?
We're talking about God, right?
Okay.
Well, number 13, we start departing from Santa Claus here. The God will reward and punish the soul in the afterlife. Well, yeah. Santa Claus is, punishing
in this life.
The kid in this life with goodies and lumps of coal or something. So, and somehow the soul feels pain without a body, right?
Well, as long as you're starting to talk magic, you might as well go that extra step. And
right. So there's no evidence that there's a soul that lives out in the afterlife. All the evidence is that when your body dies, you die. That's the end of it, and that's what atheists believe, or what our position is. So the next one, before we get to the sort of the demarcation point for deism, is God is benevolent, aside from judgment. So you can do this lots of different ways. You can say that God as well slightly favors humanity and looking out for humanity, or many religions, I think even Christianity goes and says God is omnibenevolent, right? He is the essence of good, the essence of benevolence. And this brings, of course, the problem of evil, right? We now have omniscience, omnipotence, and benevolence, right? Which raises the question of, well, if there's evil, if there's bad things that happen in the world, how can this be, right? If a God is so powerful and he wants this to happen and he knows it's going to happen, why isn't he preventing it, right? Why are there tsunamis? Why are there people dying in mining disasters and so on? So for me, the omnibenevolence is the least believable of the three omnis, right? Every being acts in their own self-interest unless they've had their power removed from them or they're being sabotaged somehow, right? I don't know of any being that's sentient that doesn't act in its own self-interest, right? That isn't corrupted or broken or whatever, right? And we're presuming a God here, right? That isn't sabotaged, isn't being controlled or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. So I claim that at this point we are to the point where we're pretty close to the beliefs of deisms, or deists, who are kind of this sort of absentee landlord, that there is this notion of an afterlife and reward and punishment, but that God is kind of letting things go on its own way. And you'll see this phrase in deists of nature's God, or the supreme being, or the divine author. And we're not talking about God, Jehovah, of Christianity. This is a very different notion of God. And so the next 16 or so of these is really sort of deviating from deism, right? So even though we have a lot of Christians today saying, oh, the founding fathers, they believed in God, they were Christians. They must have been Christians, right? If they believed in God. That's not true, right? The notion of deism is very, very different.
And I'd actually say that your deism demarcation line occurs about 7 steps earlier.
Earlier? Yeah.
Because deism doesn't necessarily have anything to do with benevolence,
right?
Nothing to do with rewards or punishments. There's nothing about the specific characteristics of God which would eliminate omniscience. Mm-hmm. Doesn't dictate morality. There's not necessarily an idea of of souls or that we're a special creation. It's just the idea that it's basically a first cause kind of situation, that there's some, some higher power that created all of this.
That's certainly the minimalist deism, right? That's what you just described is what I think all deists subscribe to. I think there's some variations even within deism.
Well, yeah, sure.
Just like there's lots and lots and lots of variations within Christianity.
I suppose you could be a deist who happens to think that God prefers you out of everybody else. But if you have this absentee landlord thing, that God basically started the wheels in motion and let it go, then you have to say that he doesn't care or interact in any way. And one of, at least among organized deists, one of the tenets is that if a God exists, he has no interaction with us. He doesn't care about prayers or appeals. He's unconcerned with human events entirely. That he is.
I think that's very likely. I mean, if I were all powerful, I don't concern myself with gnats in the room unless they're bothering me, right? I don't concern myself with the bacteria over in the corner, right?
What exactly can they do for me? And why is it that praise? We talked about how the Old Testament is like this, anthology of all of Jehovah's mistakes, and you can just kind of picture him, sitting up on a cloud crying, saying, "Oh, I just want them to love me," and and it keeps falling apart over and over again.
Right?
But let's take a caller real quick.
Yeah, we're live September 9th, and we have our phone number up. Give us a call.
And if you can see the number right there, then you're actually watching live. We got Adam.
Yes.
How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are y'all?
All right.
Pretty good.
Well, I catch y'all on Sundays. I've never called in. I tell myself every Sunday I'm going to call in and tell y'all I enjoy watching. But
well, I appreciate it.
So I've done that today. I also wanted to ask you, there's a movie called Zeitgeist.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen that.
Seen it.
Okay, well, that's what I was calling about, the arguments it raises, how many different religions carry the same birth and resurrection stories as Jesus Christ, and how it all goes back to the constellations, and that's how early man saw the way the world worked by watching the constellations, and those are all stories from that.
Yeah, that's one of the big points it's making is that at their roots, religions draw heavily from astrology, which is based on real astronomy, right? Which is fundamentally real, right? The rising of the constellations, the names of the constellations, the precession of the Earth's orbit, all these things can explain a lot of features in religion. Is the gist of the part of the movie I saw. I saw the first 45 minutes of an hour and a half movie.
Yeah, the movie's basically in 3 parts, and I actually wrote some commentary on this not too long ago at one of our Yahoo lists and on a couple other blogs. The first part focuses on his Christianity and the links that it has to other religions, other died and risen savior cults and astrological stuff. The second part of the movie goes into 9/11 conspiracy stuff, and the third part of the movie goes into why you don't have to pay taxes. And as far as I'm concerned, the whole movie is trash. The first third is the best part, but what it does is it kind of overextends the case. It's true that there are similarities, but it tries, like as it does in the second 2/3, to kind of tie this together in a conspiracy package, to where Christianity was perhaps an invention that was based on these previous beliefs. And you have to, first question you have to ask yourself is, which is more likely, that somebody intentionally invented a religion and based it on other religions, or that we're witnessing something that's naturally occurring, which is societies integrating and changing over time, and common themes recurring. I mean, we see it all the time in music and plays and movies. There's nothing original coming out of Hollywood. And in many cases, they are directly adapting older movies and plays and whatever. But in some cases, it's just that there's a limited number of ideas that humans are going to come up with on any given theme. Now, looking at the New Testament and the Old as literature and comparing it to other myths and superstitions and other religions, yeah, there's a lot of strong ties. And I happen to think that for the most part, it tells a lot more about who we are as humans and what types of things we hold as important, as Don was talking about with the astrology, the appeal to the stars, which is common. And
well, sun worship became a big deal when we became an agricultural society,
right?
Right, and the sun is your lifeblood, and you start paying a lot more attention to it. If you are a hunter-gatherer, the night is more important because you're potentially going to do your hunting at night. You're going to pay more attention to the moon because that's when the hunting is going to be good for you.
So I liked watching the first third of Zeitgeist just because it puts a good package on a lot of similar themes, and there are really good facts in there. I mean, strong facts. But the case that they try to build out of it, I don't think is justified. But it may be, kind of a bias on my part towards which authors I've been reading more of. For example, I'm not a big fan of Acharya S. or Atwill, and I read more like Robert Price and Bart Ehrman because I think they make a more scholarly case that doesn't try to tie things together with the kind of conspiracy bow.
All right.
That's a long roundabout answer to your question.
No, that's fine. When I saw it, that's what I thought. I wondered if y'all saw it because y'all always do your homework and check everything over for everybody. But I appreciate it.
Yeah, personally, I think I'm going to dig into it a little more. I was pretty fascinated by the connections. I didn't realize how closely connected Christianity might be with some of the Egyptian beliefs, and I think that's pretty interesting. And certainly the astrology or astronomy angle, I knew something about, but they've made a pretty strong case, and I think I'd like to go check that out. So maybe we'll do a show on that in the near future.
That's very possible. Thanks a lot, Adam. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I would encourage, by the way, anybody who wants to look into this stuff, because most of you who watch regularly know me and know that I'm fascinated with it anyway, whether it be real New Testament history, lost scriptures, Gnostic Gospels, the Nag Hammadi Library. But the question of Jesus' historicity and how the New Testament stories relate to other stories, be they astrological or from other religions, is an interesting one. And the one thing that I'd caution people on is check your sources and try to get a variety of them. Because the one thing that I've had, and this is why I'm so down on Zeitgeist, and actually the first third of it is great except for the conclusion that they try to draw from it. There's good information there. But what I'm afraid of is that, and this is partly because the rest of the movie is conspiracy theory crap, but I'm afraid that it presents those facts in such a way that the people who don't know much about it will go, wow, that's a compelling case that I've never thought about it, and not look further to see that maybe what we're talking about is commonalities among humans and literature and the way we tend to look at things, and not so much that this was invented out of whole cloth, as a means to control the masses.
Well, yeah, and I guess we have a sign that we often have up on.
We used to
that says skepticism is a virtue, and it's even good to be skeptical of claims that you'd really like to be true.
Yeah. I think the Jesus historicity question is a big one, regardless of what's in the Zeitgeist films. I mean, if you just accepted the stories as original, do they actually apply to anybody who actually lives?
Well, there's a lot of parallel themes in the earlier religions that were sort of around Rome or around that time, and around Greece and such. So, that's pretty compelling to me. That hey, this is a montage of earlier things.
Mithraism, Zoroastrianism, yeah.
Right. The Egyptian.
I don't know
Greek.
who's actually. I think they're probably still talking on it too. So you want to hit the next point?
So let me go on. Number 15, leaps of faith. We're trying to make our leaps of faith to Christianity. We've gone 14 leaps so far. I think you could have gone other directions on all of these and been at least equally likely to go those ways. So number 15, that God made humans in His own image. So there's this idea of God as an old man in the sky, which leads to a lot of sexism, I think, because we got a male-dominated thing. Men get to have power over the women and all that. So that's part of Christianity, definitely. It's egocentric. We want God to look like us, right? So we make gods that supposedly created us in His own image.
I was laughing at all the text that just blurred over your face.
Okay. I don't know what that was. Okay. Number 16, that God interacts with humans. So you could have a God that doesn't give a hoot about humans, right, and doesn't interact with us, even if He cares about us, right? So that's really a separate issue. Number 17, God wants people to believe in Him. So that we have this problem. One of the things I've brought up on one of the shows is we have people who believe in these religions end up causing harm to others, right? We have people who believe in creationism and intelligent design sabotaging the education of other people. We have people who believe in embryos having souls sabotaging embryos that would otherwise be discarded, used for stem cell research. Right. We have all these things, right? And so we have, but yet we have this God that supposedly wants people to believe in Him, right? So you actually have evil being created by God's wish of people to believe in Him, right? And this is what I call the problem of evil belief. It's very closely related to the problem of evil. If God was benevolent, He would just show Himself and say, "Hi ho, here I am." You don't need to have this belief, right? You can, you can get suspend with that, right? But if you have this God that wants people to believe in Him, then and He's hiding, right? Then you got a problem.
And by the way, if you're sitting out there as a Christian, shaking your head or pretending, thinking that something here is being overlooked, like, God couldn't do something that overt as to show Himself, because that would eliminate the free will, which is so essential to the belief system that you kind
that's
of
the
adhere
rationalization
to.
behind that, right?
Yeah, you're wrong. You're completely and totally wrong.
Let him have him, Matt.
And I have one word for you.
It's time for your rant. Go for it.
Satan.
Satan. Okay.
I have a second word for you. Israelites. Satan, without any doubt in your theology, knows with absolute certainty that God exists and still exercised his free will not to worship God. So just because you happen to know something is no I could know for a fact right now, if your God showed up and demonstrated that He existed right in front of me and said, "Yep, I'm the guy from the Old Testament who said, go kill all your neighbors and bring back the young virgins," I would absolutely believe, assuming He made a relevant demonstration of credentials, that He existed. But I wouldn't worship Him. You know why? Because I actually do have free will, and I don't want to worship something that is morally bankrupt, that is sitting there, sending people out to do His bidding, all the while saying, "Oh, I just love you guys so much, but if you don't love me back, I'm going to smack you around." It's silly. The Israelites, by the way,
it's extortion, right?
If you buy your Old Testament stories, they had pretty much concrete evidence that a God existed. I mean, all those plagues, and oh, by the way, the parting of the Red Sea, and they get a tower of fire, a pillar of fire, leading them by day, and it turns into a pillar of clouds by night, and manna from heaven, and it's leading them through the desert. Who the hell could possibly doubt given that kind of evidence? Yet that doesn't destroy their free will. And oh, by the way, what happens when they get to the mountain? Moses goes away for a little while, and they say, screw that God, we're going to make a new one.
Molten gods,
we're going to make us a
horrible
golden calf.
Molten gods.
So your free will argument has been considered and dismissed. But, if you got a better one, feel free to call in.
That's great, Matt. That's great. So that more or less hits number 18, which is that God wants to hide because He values faith. And it's kind of a circular thing, right? You got to believe in something. Yeah,
I'm gonna stay hidden. I'm a prankster God.
right.
To quote Bill Hicks there.
You have to believe in it because it wants to hide because it wants you to believe in it.
Well, some of these people who are willing to make these kind of
it's just confusing to me.
The people who are willing to make a lot of these mental gymnastic moves are the same ones who are saying that God or Satan, perhaps, we haven't figured out which one, went and buried all these fossils to confuse us and make us not believe evolution. But if you're going to have that kind of prankster God mentality, to paraphrase Bill Hicks, I don't know what to tell you.
Well, Paul said that God can't lie, so it can't have been God, right?
Well, he says he can't lie, but obviously Paul didn't read the Old Testament.
Yeah.
So
Paul thinks that lying was a virtue. I think
where God created in them a lying spirit. Go look it up. It happens. It's in your book. It's not my fault.
Okay. Number 19. God performs miracles, presumably to bolster faith. Right. So. But nothing ever is really big, or nothing ever is repeatable.
Well, he used to perform big miracles, but he's getting old.
Little parlor tricks. I don't know what he's doing yet.
He's like, he's like the old stage magician who's now like,
pulling
quarters out of kids' ears.
Right.
Your miracles
or
are
he's
less
crashing
impressive.
Airplanes and saving one guy, and he gets all the credit.
Speaking of crashing airplanes, did you hear about the airline that sacrificed a goat in order to repair their plane?
Oh no, I didn't.
This is the world you live in, and it's the one I'm trying to avoid.
I heard about China preventing Buddhists from reincarnating. That was pretty funny.
Preventing Buddhists?
No, they made a law that Buddhists can't reincarnate without express permission of the Chinese government.
Due to population concerns, this time you're dead for real.
I don't know what. That was just too funny.
You guys really can rationalize anything, can't you?
Okay, so number 20, God had a hand in writing the Bible. So right around in here, we're kind of getting into a lot of these are Jewish beliefs, and we're sort of slithering off over to Christianity. So God had a hand in writing the Bible. Number 21, the Old Testament Bible is true. But just because something's written down doesn't mean anything, right? Harry Potter is written down, right? We can't, we don't have people running around saying that's true, right? So writing something down sort of makes it coherent, makes it whole, makes it whatever, makes it a unified thing. But that's sort of what I'm fighting against here, is picking things apart. Number 22. Especially the Old Testament part of the Bible about Adam and Eve and original sin, and this is a necessary part of the Christian church, because they want to play mind games with you. They want to put this guilt trip on you, so you'll donate money, so you'll pay attention to them, so you'll listen to the church and obey the church, right? To get you out of this original sin problem, right? And we've done whole shows on that of How can you be punished for what somebody else did? And gosh, if God, weren't such a screw up, maybe He would have just killed off Adam and Eve after doing that and made a more perfect man and woman.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have all these problems, right?
And of course, there's a huge question of if that was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, how the hell were they supposed to know that it was wrong to eat from it in the first place?
Right, it's a catch-22.
I mean, you can say, well, God told them, yes, but they have no concept of this, is the point.
Right.
I mean, you create this kind of mythology that is so grand and all-encompassing, and then you just kind of shrug off all the little problems that have created, And I'm not speaking to everybody. I realize there's a lot of liberal and moderate Christians who disregard all of that as just, that's just metaphor and Jewish history and blah, blah, blah. All right, great. Congratulations. You're not buying into this really stupid nonsense. You're just buying into some of the stupid nonsense. You're trusting in this, it's all about loving your neighbor and turning the other cheek, and not worrying at all about how are you drawing the line between which verses count and which ones don't. I mean, Thomas Jefferson goes through and redacts his Bible, removing all the claims of divinity and supernatural powers, and basically just leaves the message of Jesus. And good for him. Jefferson was brilliant, but I don't think he went far enough. I think when you actually look at get a red letter Bible and just read the words of Jesus, ignore everything else, and come tell me how it is what is the key to salvation, and how does that compare to the doctrine that you were taught your whole life in whatever church you happen to be in? What did Jesus actually say about it according to your Bible? And then you can look
ahead of us here, but go ahead.
Okay, I'll come back. But you can look at those words and ask, is this really good advice? Is this something that we should consider divine? And then once you've got those questions in your head, think about, how the hell do you know that those are words that anybody actually spoke ever? Ever. What reason do you have to believe that this book's a reliable testimony as to what somebody said? And especially when what he's saying is so asinine and bad advice. I mean,
It's certainly not the greatest thing in the world. Well, you talk about people who don't necessarily buy into this Adam and Eve thing, but if you don't have a fall of man, the whole reason for Jesus' existence and the whole reason for Christianity goes out the window.
Yeah, if you're not born corrupt, then this whole idea, by the way, this was a brilliant move in theology, was to have God keep screwing up, and finally he comes up with the ultimate solution, which is to sacrifice himself to himself.
Okay,
to create a loophole.
That's my last one. You're getting ahead of me here.
See, you
got that Jesus thing going. You're all wound up.
I got the Jesus going. By the way, for those who are wondering
in fact, that's the next one. God made a rule that he needed blood sacrifice to himself to somehow fix that sin. Right?
See, I wasn't ahead of you.
There's got to be a blood sacrifice, but who made that rule? Who made that rule? What sense does that make? Why didn't he just get rid of the rule if he's all powerful? He's not all powerful, apparently.
If I'm making the rules, I don't need to make a loophole. I changed the rule. I mean, this is infinite wisdom that qualifies as some kind. By the way, for those of you who are wondering about the lying spirit quote, it's 1 Kings chapter 22, verses 22 and 23, I think. But you can go look it up.
It's on your screen.
Yeah, they popped it up for me. Because I don't have it all memorized, and I don't have time to look it up, and I really don't care.
Okay, all right.
It's your book. Care. You explain it.
Okay. So God made the rule. That's number 23. Number 24. Now we're getting into the Jesus land. God created a half-breed child. Right, half-breed. He's half human, half God. Just like the sons of God who came down and interbreed with the human women folk to become the heroes of old.
The child of a ghost and a virgin.
And it's just, isn't it kind of a coincidence that just around the time that the Judaism and the Greek mythology kind of come together in the melting pot of Rome, you get the Greek gods who go off and sire children with mortals. That whole concept appearing in Christianity isn't that just a funny coincidence? So we got the number 25, the purpose of the half-breed child was to be tortured and killed as a means of fixing the sin. Right.
Yeah. Not only did he go and create a loophole, but he created a particularly vicious one.
Right. Torture and killing, just to get your attention, I guess.
A lot of people would play this up as well. God's got an important message for you. I can think of much better ways to deliver a message. I certainly wouldn't write it down and communicate it to people in languages that I know are going to die off and be mistranslated over the years. But I still understand this. By the way, I'm going to go down and a third of me, which is all of me, is going to take human form and be tortured and bloodied in order to make up for all the mistakes in the past. Thanks. Oh, and the future. I don't want to.
Because otherwise he couldn't feel pain and he wouldn't be omnipotent.
I don't want to trample all over your.
It's all
dogma,
quite confusing. Okay.
So what's the next leap?
We're kind of related to this. Is you might as well blame the Jews for this while you're at it, right?
I got email that I don't blame the Jews enough, but we won't go there.
Well, there are lots of Jewish kooks as well, so I think that was the point that he was making. Anyway, number 26, this half-breed named Jesus could perform miracles. Okay, although even in the Bible, even in the New Testament, his mother was surprised by the miracles. And I'd say one of the biggest miracles was his missing 30 years. Right?
Yeah.
If you're going to invent a character, missing 30 years is no problem. You just say, and 30 years later, blah, blah, blah. But if you've got a godchild running around the earth, presumably, those 30 years might be interesting. But apparently no one thought it was interesting.
The Gnostics thought it was interesting because they wrote that essentially during Jesus' missing years, he went off to Egypt and other places and learned Eastern mysticism and other things. And he brought these things back and incorporated them into his teachings.
Oh, okay. So that explains, Krishna, I guess, except the timing's wrong.
And John Prine, if there's any John Prine fans out there, he thought it was interesting. So he wrote a song called Jesus the Missing Years. Go look it up. John Prine's great.
Okay. Well, I want to remind our listeners that we're a live call-in show. Our number is up on the screen. Getting towards the end of my topic, and you're welcome to call in, tell me I'm wrong, laugh with us at some of these absurdities. Yeah.
We're fine with being wrong. By the way, as a reminder, we're going to IHOP after the show. We're shows are at 4:30. We'll be there from 5 to 7. That's IHOP at the corner of I-35 and Cesar Chavez. Feel free to come on down and join us. It's good dinner.
Okay. Well, let me hit the last few leaps of faith. Leap of faith number 27. After Jesus' death, he rose again and appeared to his followers. Right, and we got problems there because we got 4 conflicting versions of that in the Gospels.
Yeah, you got problems way before then, though. I mean, you've got
Go ahead.
Luke putting the birth of Jesus around the time of Quirinius, and then Matthew's putting it at the time of Herod, and there's a decade of difference between those two.
The multiple bloodlines leading up to Jesus.
Yeah, different
who presumably
genealogies.
didn't even have a bloodline from.
Basically what you've got in the New Testament is a handful of books that at best estimate were written decades, several decades at least, after the events that they're supposed to tell about. You have no contemporary independent confirmation outside of the New Testament.
You don't know who wrote the New Testament.
You don't know who the authors are, at least for the Gospels and stuff. We have, Paul and others on good authority. But you have these stories about miracles for which you have no corroboration. You have errors in internal conflict over historical facts, like whether Herod was governor, whether Quirinius was taking the census, and by the way, what an absurd census it was to have everybody travel back to the home of their ancestors, or at least play it up that way. You have all of these internal inconsistencies, no external corroboration from any contemporaries. I mean, you can cite Josephus if you want to, but Josephus wasn't a contemporary of Jesus. And oh, by the way, the one passage is pretty much granted across the board, even by Christian scholars, to be a forgery, and the other one's largely irrelevant. And yet you want so desperately to believe that you're willing to overlook all of that and say, yep, these are the words of Jesus. This is the story of his life, and these are the things that he said. If anybody else presented anything similar to this, with the same timelines, the same internal consistencies, everybody, and they brought it up right now, and said this is the one true religion, everybody would laugh at them. And I don't mean that. I mean, I've been mean today to my Christian friends, and I don't mean to be mean. What I'm trying to do is that when we're talking about beliefs that are ridiculous, then that means they're deserving of ridicule. And I'm not ridiculing you, I'm ridiculing the belief. And that's a distinction that a lot of people just can't make. I'm not attacking you as a person. If anything, I'm trying to find out exactly what it is that makes you think that you need to keep believing this nonsense, and hopefully maybe free you from that so that you can live a life without superstition. I'm not calling it. And there are plenty of extremely intelligent Christians. I mean, and I realize that there's a little bit of rationalization and some compartmentalization, and I also understand that you think I'm completely wrong and that I've been misled and perhaps misguided by Satan. Heck, I had family members tell me that I was preaching for the devil. I understand that there's a difference in what we think. What my concern is what's actually true and what can be demonstrated. I actually care about whether or not what I believe is true. And when I look at a book like the Bible, it's a book, and there's good stuff in there. There's even some good secular stuff in there. But there's no good reason to think that any of it is true. Someone I've been talking to recently has tried to call the Bible a history book. No. No. It's not a history book, and neither is Lord of the Rings. I realize you want to believe it.
The Iliad, which has a lot more real history in it, but it's fictional, right?
Just because
there
were
and all that good stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, okay, we know Herod existed, and Herod's mentioned in the New Testament. So therefore, all the rest of it's true. Turning water to wine, loaves of fishes walking on water, healing the lame and the sick, and casting demons into swine. No. You need to actually present some evidence and some good reason to think that those things are true, apart from, I just want to believe it. But if that is your answer, then congratulations. If you're just believing something because you want to, then obviously you don't care whether or not what you believe is true. You care about whether or not it's comfortable to you. And that's your choice, and I'm fine allowing, I'm not going to try and steal your hope and your religion away so that, you're miserable and everything else. But realize that your personal opinions, which do govern the actions you take,
such as who
you vote for, what you vote for, and how you interact with others. Just remember that your rights end where other people's begin. And you can believe any kind of crazy notion you want, as long as the actions that you take on that don't affect other people. When the actions you take on behalf of your beliefs start affecting other people, that's when we need to sit down and say, you know what? Not so much. So how many you got left?
Just a couple.
All right, hit them. Somebody's on the phone, but we're getting infos.
We invite callers. Number 8, belief in the dead Jesus is the new and only route to eternal bliss in the afterlife. So they had to seal off this other leap of faith that got you to the fact that there's an afterlife and that God is, somehow controlling this, to Jesus is the path. Jesus is the way there, and everybody else is going to go to hell, right? It's an exclusive club. You got to believe.
Especially the Catholics.
Are they going to hell? Or
If you ask the Protestants and Calvinists.
Oh yeah, that's always funny to me is how the different sects think that the other sects are all going to go to hell. It's too funny. Yeah. But they're one big happy family when they're going after the gays or they're going after the atheists.
Oh yeah, as long as there's a bigger target,
Right.
Oh, we're buddies.
They're pretty good.
Catholics and Protestants.
Ganging up on somebody else when the time comes.
As soon as there's nobody else to fight, those guys will rip each other to shreds.
Yeah. Okay. So number 29, God and Jesus and this magical thing called the Holy Spirit are all the one and the same. This is the whole Trinity idea.
Which was invented in 325 AD at the Council of Nicaea.
Okay.
Pretty much out of whole cloth. I'm down on Zeitgeist for making up conspiracy crap, but that one kind of holds. There's not much evidence that any of the early Christians had any notion at all of the Trinity.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, people should be aware that Christianity and all these beliefs have changed dramatically over time, right? And for example, this covenant of marriage didn't used to be the church didn't used to have anything to do with it until 1263 or somewhere around there. It's like the whole half of the existence of the Catholic Church, of the Christian Church, they didn't care very much about marriage, or they actually warned against it in many cases, right?
Paul did.
Because loving a woman meant that you couldn't love God as much, right? It was a competition, right? And they thought it was better to love God. So yeah, Christianity has changed many times over the years, and it's still evolving.
You're talking about a period of time, by the way, where getting married pretty much meant saying we're married.
Yeah, there's that, and it had a lot of almost an indentured servitude idea to it.
Here's my bucket of goods. Please give me your daughter.
Right.
And I'll take two if the price is right.
Financial transaction, right? Okay, number 30. Jesus will appear again at the end of the world and end the world as we know it. So the whole end times thing is really very much a Christian thing. So this causes Christians to want to go out and potentially destroy civilization, or they welcome that, they look forward to that for an extra special trip to heaven. I think of this whole end times thing as snuff porn. You're getting off on the suffering of other people, and I don't think very highly of it. So we have 30 leaps of faith, I think, and I think there are really more here than the 30 identified. So, how likely is Christianity to be true? Not very likely. This is insane. So we invite callers to call in and tell me I'm wrong here, or hey, this little leap of faith makes a lot of sense to me for whatever reason. Feel free to do that, or talk about atheism.
Or talk about what you think.
Ask us where we go when we die.
What you think is the justification for your beliefs. I mean, I've said quite a bit today about and focused primarily on Christianity, as I will often do. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that we live in a country that's 70 to 80% Christian. Two is that at least with regard to my rights in this country, Christians are the problem. I don't have, I'm not letting Islam or Judaism or any other religion off light. It's just that, well, they don't have the power base to do anything to me, so they don't become the prime targets. Matter of fact,
we're spending a lot of money dealing with Islam in a sort of indirect way.
Yeah.
Right? We're spending a lot of money in the Middle East, and we're doing a lot of song and dance to get that oil. If they weren't sitting on a lot of oil, then things would be different, I think. But anyway.
But as far as rights issues and First Amendment
power,
issues,
you're right.
there's only a couple. There's less than 1 million Jews, and less than that of
course, there's
Muslims.
a big conspiracy theory that the Jews control everything.
Yeah, well. But the thing is that one of the other reasons is that Christianity is the religion that I'm most familiar with, having come from that background, and I've only actually been an atheist for 5 or 6 years, give or take. Coming from a fundamentalist background with, I was raised in a Southern Baptist primarily environment. I have spent a great deal of time studying the Bible, both as a Christian and as a non-Christian. So it's familiar to me. And I realize I probably pissed off quite a few people today. You know, and if that's the case, if you're sitting at home stewing because I was mean towards your religion, I'm sorry. Take a minute and realize that I'm not mad at you. But there's only so many times that you can use this kind of religion as an excuse before I am actually talking about you. Having been presented with all of the evidence, having presented, being allowed to or encouraged to develop the tool set that allows you to analyze these claims. If you don't want to do that, then you're just believing what's most comfortable for you. And if you don't want to develop the tools that allow you to figure out whether or not something's true, then you know, I hate to say this, but I have no more reason to consider your opinion at all. I mean, if you've actually sat down and reasoned through these things and thought through them and come up with you know, questions and concerns, or you think that you validated it through some logical process, great. I'd love to have a conversation. But if you're just stubbornly saying, no, 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 I don't want to worry about that science-y stuff or that logic-y stuff, or, oh, you just don't understand, then there's no point in having any conversation. And, you know, I'm sorry for the people who get upset about that, but some of us actually care about truth. Real truth, not the I'm going to put a capital T on it and sing it at the end of a song in church and believe that it's truth. That's not truth. That's posturing.
Yeah, well, I think you make a good host for this show because you've been on both sides of the equation, right? You've been a believer, and yes, you can understand what these people are saying, and although it's kind of Greek to me sometimes, where these beliefs come from and why people buy into them, right? I really wasn't raised in a religious background, yeah. So it's all lost on me. So you know, and I don't sugarcoat it because I don't see any reason to do that. So that's perhaps why I end up pissing off some people.
Yeah.
So
anyway,
we have a caller.
We do have callers waiting, so we'll go ahead and get to them. There's more, by the way. The number's up. Sue?
Well, hi, guys. How you doing today?
Good. How you doing?
Oh, pretty good. As usual, something you said while I was on hold made me kind of just a little bit change what I wanted to say.
Okay.
But I was just thinking about how I was raised in church. I mean, I went to church every Sunday. I was baptized. I was in the classes and stuff. But I don't think I ever believed in a God or the system. It never seemed like it worked. It was like, and he did what? He died for our sins, and that's how? How does that affect me? I mean, it was all very confusing. It made no sense. But that's not what I called. I called because I was thinking that modern Christians, and you talked earlier in the show about theists and how the founding fathers weren't all Christians.
There are a few Christians, but many of them aren't, yeah.
I was thinking that modern Christians believe in, like, a 50s idea of Christianity, that religion used to be much more harsh than it is today. Just believing in it, following the doctrines and stuff used to be a harder thing. And I think that we
How do you mean harder? Can you explain what you mean by harder?
Well, you had, for example, Catholics before the 60s couldn't eat fish on Sundays, and they had to be
more strict, you mean?
What they ate and stuff. And you just had to wear a dress to church when I was a kid. Today you can wear anything. I mean, it just used to be stricter. There used to be, and I'm not talking about when I was young. I'm talking about earlier Christianity, before that, like stocks and
well, in a sense,
to keep you awake while the sermon's going and things. And if you don't show up, you're in trouble. And you know,
religion I think had a stronger hold at that time. It had a stronger hold on our culture, and it's weakening.
But we have, I think, for modern Christians, they're taking a huge leap of faith to believe that Norman Rockwell version of Christianity ever really existed to begin with. And that's what I had to say.
Yeah,
There is a lot of that, I think, this idea, this very romanticized version of the past, and we want to get back there. It's very true of Islam. They really think that at the time of Muhammad, that was the perfect time, and they don't want to leave that time. And you hear that even in Christianity. You want to go back to so-called traditional marriage, which was not any tradition in the Bible. You want to go back to the old values or whatever, God-fearing and all these things that they want to go back to. And of course, the people leading the charge here are the people who are running the churches, right? They want to have those pews filled. They want to have that money flowing in, right? So they've got a conflict of interest, I think.
This is one of the kind of.
And you see people like on, I don't know how much TV you watch, but like on Big Brother, there's a couple of people that are really.
I thought they voted the last viewer of that off. Oh, that was in The Onion. Sorry.
And they were talking about, how Lord help me win this, and one woman said that she had a vision that she was going to win stuff. And it's, even if you believe in a God, how can you be so arrogant to think he cares about Big Brother?
I don't know. Maybe that's what's occupying so much of his time, that he's not, healing amputees and stuff.
I guess so.
Stopping tsunamis and those.
He got TiVo, doesn't have to bother with commercials anymore, and now all his time spent on the real meat of the show.
Well, I'll let you go, guys.
Thanks, Sue.
Had that thought while we were watching, and
okay,
share it with us.
Thanks.
Sure, thanks.
I did a show a while back on sex in the afterlife, and that might explain, why they're so busy up there. But
and
you can look that up on the web if you want.
If you think about it, God must kind of be a voyeur. So
absolutely.
Once upon a time, all the people who were having sex that you could watch as a god were down on earth, and as they start migrating up to heaven, then his focus on earth just shifts away, so he's not paying as much attention. Because now there's more sex going on in the afterlife.
Okay.
So, it makes sense. No, but going back to what Sue said, this is one area where, as thin as it is, I happen to side with Phelps and the recently deceased D. James Kennedy and Falwell and some of the others. And that is...
Kennedy died?
D. James Kennedy died Friday, I believe.
Oh, man, I missed that.
He retired a couple weeks ago, died Friday. There was much rejoicing. In all
world's a better place. Man.
In all seriousness, what I said yesterday, I sincerely meant, and that is, I'll say the same thing that I said with regard to Falwell. I realized that his family just lost somebody they loved, and I sympathize with them, and I'm sorry for their loss. In the bigger picture things, the guy had a reasonably decent life, of moderate length, but he was a colossal asshat who worked against good things in order to promote his personal dogma. And he did it in conjunction with Pat Robertson and Jerry Falwell and these other people's. I'm sorry, I can't help that the person did more harm in their life than good, and that I'm happy that they're no longer on the planet.
No longer doing harm.
But I do understand the loss of the family, and my condolences. Maybe if you'd loved him more, he'd have been nice while he was alive. All right, that was a little too mean.
Compliment.
That was a little too mean. I'm sorry. No, but when I say that this is the thin line where I actually would side with Phelps and Kennedy and the others, is these modern megachurches and these moderate Christians and liberal Christians have a customized personal theology that is nothing at all like any Christianity before it. It's this focusing on the things they like and disregarding the rest of it. They no longer have the Bible as an authority. They themselves are, in fact, the authority. And the only thing that they have to justify, for example, they say, I believe this, and I believe that I'm speaking for God. And when asked what their justification is, the only thing they can do is go to their neighbor, who is a member of their congregation, happens to agree with them, which means they must be godly too. And now that we're an authority of two.
Incestuous little club.
And it goes around in this little circle. And eventually everybody is their own authority. And you, just like any other social group, you bond with those who happen to agree with you on certain things. And that's how these churches form. They no longer have the authority of the Bible. So my question is, why bother pulling it out? Why bother quoting any verses? Well, you have to. It's this catch-22 because they're calling themselves Christians,
Yeah, they want to plug into all that power and all that history and all that.
They want it without the baggage.
Yeah.
You don't get it without the baggage. You at least have to make some attempt to explain the baggage away. I mean, Phelps disregards a handful of things in the Bible. Hovind has said he believes it cover to cover, including the cover. So he doesn't bother trying to explain away anything in there.
At least he claims that. Huh?
Yeah. Well, he believes the cover because his name's on it. That's his standard joke.
Keeps that money rolling in.
So we got a couple more callers on the line I want to get to. Lynn?
Yes, hi.
How you doing?
I'm calling to reassure you about last week's show.
Oh.
You were saying you were disappointed that nobody called in.
Yeah.
You thought maybe
it was
because
shocking.
Other things were on other stations that were popular, that competed with it. I think it was just because everybody was so engrossed in the material that you were presenting. We wanted to hear it.
Well, I
hope so. That'd
Tracy
be nice.
will be thrilled to hear that.
Yeah. Well, we love.
Yeah,
we
I love
Tracy.
listening to Tracy, so it didn't bother me at all that she went pretty much the whole show.
Yeah, I enjoyed her. I love your show. I don't happen to be an atheist, but I'm definitely what you guys call atheist friendly.
Okay.
I've
Well,
never
that's
known an atheist personally that I didn't like.
Okay.
I have.
There's a few I don't like, so
See,
you're ahead of me.
I've known maybe I've known fewer.
I don't like
atheists
Doug.
than you.
Oh, yes, I do. I like Doug. Well, thanks for calling, Lynn. If you can
you're
make
welcome.
it, and any of the other viewers out there who are atheist friendly, as a reminder, you're welcome to join us for dinner at IHOP.
Thank you.
Appreciate the call.
Thank you for calling.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, we'll be going to IHOP after the show. We're there from 5 to 7-ish at the corner of I-35 and Cesar Chavez. So yeah, we don't get any feedback from like the cable companies.
We don't know how many people are watching. The only measure we get is the folks writing in, and they say, I listen all the time, or people calling in and say, hey, I just caught you on the show, channel surfing. Those are the only indications we get of how many folks are out there.
At least watching live. We do have input on how many have downloaded episodes and watched it on Google Video, etc.
Yeah.
And the reason that we're concerned about the live one is because it affects calls, and because they recently moved the show from the 4:30 to 6 time slot to the 3 to 4:30 time slot. And we have no way to figure out exactly which
we have a
time
little
slot's
bit
better.
of control over when the slot is, and we'd like to get the biggest audience possible, of course.
Yeah, we could possibly move around as many as 4 times a year with the different seasons that they have for Pact. So if there's,
some of them out of our control.
If you're one of the regular viewers who used to watching the 4:30 to 6 slot and can't anymore, and there's a better time, or if you've stopped watching at 3, let us know. And if you prefer the 3 to 4:30 time slot, let us know that too. It's some of the only feedback we get, with regard to the issues of how many people are watching and callers, because the cable companies don't track it, or at least not as far as we've been able to find out. We have a special guest who I think's got a birthday. Happy birthday!
Hi, thanks.
It's
We
Russell.
know who you are.
Russell's
who are you?
the co-host.
You're Russell,
Yes, it's me.
our other co-host. Hey, Russell.
I'm fine, and generally I feel kind of guilty for calling in when it's not my week and sort of hogging more airtime, but I guess you just reminded me that it is my birthday, so I guess I'm entitled.
There you go.
I'm not singing, though.
We'll let it slide this time. What's up, man?
I was going to throw out another leap of faith that you didn't mention, which is the notion that anything really has any kind of meaning. I mean, like, you have the concept of omnipotent, but then you get into the specifics. I mean, omnipotent meaning you can do anything, but when you get into the specifics, like, well, can he make a rock so heavy he can't lift it? They're like, no, he can only do things that are logically possible. Right. And then you say, okay, can he
then you start to do a song and dance, right? Song and dance, right, to try to make it make sense. And then there's,
can he do something evil? Or something that would be basically considered as evil, like, just murder a child for no reason. And they say things like, no, he wouldn't do that. It's not in his nature.
Does creating evil count? Because according to the Bible, he did that.
Right, sure.
That's in Isaiah, I'm pretty sure. But.
So, and you get in all sorts of paradoxes with omniscience, too, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they say it's not in his nature to do such and such. Well, that makes it easy, because, like, I could sprout wings and fly, but it's not in my nature.
Right.
So I must be omnipotent.
You're omnipotent
It's a convenient
within
excuse, yeah.
yeah, within a very small range of omnipotence.
Right. And, yeah, like you said, when it comes to omniscience, I just made a post, not on the Atheist Experience blog, but on my personal blog, Kazim's Corner, about how if you're omniscient, you can't have free will, because because the short reason is, if you're omniscient, then you already know everything that you yourself are going to do. So if you know that you're going to do something already, can you not do it? And if you don't, then you're not really omniscient.
Yep.
I love it, Russell. I love it.
All of the omnis, as far as I can tell, have some inherent problem just because they're omnis.
Right.
Yep.
That's all.
Okay. Well, have a good birthday. Thanks for
Thanks
calling.
for those brain teasers. Those are great. Yeah. Happy birthday, man.
I got, is it Charles?
Yeah,
Hey, how you doing, Charles?
not too bad. I had a question. Actually, this came up several shows back. You had said something about nothing being intrinsically evil or intrinsically good. And I was just curious about then what does it matter what direction you go, whether you're, I'm in this group and we shake our heads and smile about the other group, and they're this or that. So what does it matter in the big picture if you go one direction or the other? I'm going to go the atheist direction, let's seek truth, or let's seek whatever other group is seeking.
Because your beliefs inform your actions, and your actions have consequences which can be beneficial or harmful. And whether or not there's any intrinsic good or evil is irrelevant to whether or not your actions would qualify as good or evil based on whether they're more beneficial or more harmful.
Who decides what's beneficial and what's harmful? Yeah.
I do. And
So
you
I
do.
decide if I agree with you, I say if I agree with this group, we sit and chuckle about the other group,
Right.
or I agree with you and we sit and chuckle about it. So we don't. Does it really matter in the big picture?
Of course it matters.
The actions matter, right? If you're harming someone,
why do they matter?
well,
What do you mean, why do they matter? I'm not... It matters to me because I already, in addition to determining what I find good or evil, what I find beneficial or
it mattered
harmful...
to Hitler, too, I'm sure. So what if we go, what's to say? Well, basically majority rules, How do you get around that if there's...
Well, we don't have a majority rule situation. I guess I'm not quite sure what you're actually asking.
Well, I'm going to say whether, let's say, like for example, if the humans agreed on a sun-centered universe or an earth-centered universe.
That's a question of fact. That has nothing to do with good or evil or opinion. That's a question
Well, good
of
or evil
fact.
doesn't matter. You said there's no such thing intrinsically evil.
well, there's
No.
harm. There's harm, and there's
I'm wondering
causing
why...
suffering, and that's what I would call evil.
Well, I would say some person would disagree of certain aspects. Say, well, I don't agree that's harmful, where someone would say that is harmful. And so, how do you decide who's right or wrong?
There are lots of gray areas. I'll admit that.
That's why we have different cultures and different societies. But from a practical stance, first of all, I don't know why you use an example of whether it's a heliocentric or geocentric universe. That's a simple question of fact. It has nothing to do with opinions or morality or codes or anything else. But from a strictly practical or pragmatic stance, when you're going about and assessing whether or not action is more beneficial or more harmful, it's incredibly complex because there's a question of, is it more beneficial or harmful to me? How is it beneficial or harmful to my social group? How is it more beneficial or harmful to the entirety of humanity? And you can assess those things at a different point. Dennis and I discussed this yesterday after the Nonprofits show. I actually advocate the idea of a moral absolute in a very, very strict and limited sense. And that is, for a given situation, given the infinite number of possible actions that one can take, one of them has to be, or some group of them, has to be the most beneficial and least harmful of that set. Now, we may never actually get to the point where we have enough of a grasp on every situation to determine what that best actually is, but we can have good approximations for it. And when we get into the very, very gray areas where there's huge disagreements, where let's say you and I both agree that killing someone without cause, and we can put all kinds of stipulations on it, is murder and therefore wrong. You and I agree on that, but we may disagree on other specifics surrounding that kind of murder thing. That's where we are still working out the details towards the best possible morality, if in fact we care about it. I mean, you could make the argument that, okay, well, sociopaths don't care about it. So
part of the problem is that we don't have any absolute measure of suffering, and we can't really compare one person's suffering against another, but we can empathize with someone's suffering because we're all human, we're all wired more or less the same way, and we all feel the same things, and we can say, well, if this person's arm is chopped off or whatever, then we can sort of assume that that's painful and that's going to cause suffering, for example. But we don't have a good way of quantifying that, and until we do, we can't answer questions like this with great detail.
Yeah,
right?
One of the things is on the flip side is why on earth would anybody believe that a dogmatic assertion that not only does it matter, but there's a bearded guy in the sky who dictates what matters and why? Why would they believe that that is more true? It's kind of a stopgap. We really want something to be true, so we're going to invent some daddy figure to dictate what is most beneficial and what the rules are.
Oh, okay. No, that's pretty much it. I was just,
Cool.
If someone was like on the fence, like about the group, maybe I'm leaning towards the thinking of this, group A rather than group B, and does it really, would it really matter which direction you went?
Well, we want you to think for yourself. So we're not out here to get adherents or people to follow us because we have the right answer or whatever. We want people to, to criticize what we're saying, to think for themselves, to think through things, and maybe we can learn something from you, these sorts of things. Right?
And one of the things is to realize that in many of these situations, there actually isn't an answer, or you may not have the best answer. But one of the things is that religion often gets a pass on this. And I hear this all the time. Well, science hasn't answered this question, and therefore religion does, so religion gets the win. No, it doesn't. You actually have to demonstrate that your answer is right no matter what it is, whether it's God done it or you've discovered a new particle that is responsible, for hair growth. You actually need to demonstrate that rationally and scientifically, and until you do, it's nothing more than an assertion or hunch or wishful thinking. If you care about whether or not what you believe is true, then you have to kind of dig through those things and come to your own conclusions about, are your beliefs justified? And nobody else can answer but you. So.
Well, thank you very much.
All right. Take care. Thanks for calling.
Appreciate it. And this is probably the last call because we only got a minute.
Okay.
So, Tom, quickly.
Hey, Matt. Hey, you might help me out on this because it was about last week's show, which was really great. I TiVo'd it, that's why I didn't call in. But I was noticing that you seemed to think that Tracy was saying that your Tao or your Tao has to do with your primal things, your eating.
Yeah, and I got to cut you there, Tom, because we're out of time. We had the discussion after the show. Send me an email, and I'll talk to you more about it. You can email tv@atheist-community.org. We're on our way to IHOP. We appreciate everybody who called in this week. Sorry we couldn't get to your call in detail.
Thanks to our crew.
To Tom. Thanks to the crew that's on there.
And we got a lot of big studio audience here. We got a big crowd.
More than normal.
Come on and make it bigger.
We'll see you all in a week.